AI is everywhere, and so is the fear that is coming for your job. But what if the real story is even more interesting than that? Hey there, and welcome to the IT Guy Show, episode 22. We're calling this episode The Human in the Loop. We're talking about AI and whether or not it's going to replace our jobs or not. And I'm really excited because this is a milestone episode for the IT Guy. I know, not a big deal, but I'm excited because I have my first returning guest. He joined me for episode 1. We talked a little bit about Matrix and Element and how having federated, privacy-focused communications was essential. And now here we are 21 episodes later and several years later, if you can believe that, and we're talking about AI. It seems like what everyone's talking about right now, but let me bring my guest in first and introduce everyone to Mr. Karl Abbott. Karl, welcome back to the IT Guy Show.
Hey, Eric, glad to be back with you. And yeah, a lot has happened since we last talked. I did used to work at Element, and now I work at Microsoft, so a few changes.
Well, and for those that didn't catch episode 1, we actually used to both work at Red Hat together as part
That's
of the Red
true.
Hat Enterprise Linux team, way back in the day. It feels like, and I've had a couple of job changes since then as well. So it's been an interesting journey. We should meet up somewhere, have a drink, and catch up. But
That was should.
so for those that don't know you and aren't familiar with your amazing work, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, and something you do for fun as well.
Yeah, so like I said, I am a product manager over at Microsoft. I work with the what we call our third-party Linux vendor partnerships. So basically, anybody who's a vendor in the Linux community, we have partnerships with those Linux vendors, and I work from a product perspective of making sure that their Linux and other products work seamlessly on top of Microsoft Azure. I also am the host of a product management podcast called Productly Speaking, where we focus on the human side of product management. And so those are kind of the two professional things that I do. And then for fun, I like to do things like photography and hiking and spending time with my family, just getting to enjoy exploring the Pacific Northwest.
That's awesome. So you you've written an article, and funny thing is that's kind of what triggered the first episode that you and I did together. But you wrote an
Sure.
article out on LinkedIn, and it really caught my attention because it's something that I'm a little bit worried about, but also at the same time not worried about at all. And that's this idea that AI is out to just replace everybody's jobs. That there's going to be no work for anyone. And before I set you up, here's kind of my brief take on this whole thing. No one complains anymore about the manual assembly line. No one complains anymore about having to have 100 people out gathering wheat or working a threshing floor. Technology has changed all those things, and a lot of that has changed in the last 120 years. And we don't hear anyone complaining about that. Although I'm sure there was a lot of people that were very concerned back in the day when things like cars and the mechanized assembly line started to come out. We're seeing this now with robotics and artificial intelligence. And so I'm both a little worried because AI can do a good job, but I'm also not because a year ago we're talking about a technology that couldn't spell strawberry correctly. So I kind of go back and forth. Is this a thing or isn't it? And you kind of wrote an article that addressed this directly. Why don't you give us a kind of an overview of that?
Yeah, so the article was on AI didn't replace my work. And the article really starts to look at just what it means to lean into AI and what that actually looks like. And what you realize really quickly is that without people, nothing is going to direct the AI, and there's nobody there to judge what came out of the AI. Is this good? Is it not good? Now, it doesn't change the fact that there's a lot to AI that's impressive and that you can move really, really quickly. And so maybe you can do the same amount of work with less humans. So maybe somebody does get replaced. but also historically, we've never seen one of these major technological shifts in which society went, oh, we can do less work. Let's take more time off. It's always been, wait, we can do more work in the same time we have. Let's do more work
Hmm.
because more work is going to generate more money. That means more profits for all of us. And yeah, you know the story.
I
So we've
feel the
never
story every day.
seen those historical moments where people have gone, it is time to take vacation. There have definitely been people who have forecasted a life of leisure because all this technology is going to make things easier on us. And I just don't see that.
That's a great parallel, and it does seem to factor in that the more advanced, quote unquote, that we get, the more disruptive technology becomes. Uh, the conversation I have on the phone all the time is, "Oh, I'm sorry that I can't schedule your appointment. My computer's running slow today." It's like it's
Mhm.
probably not. It's probably just a terrible system that's running underneath it. But that's just my beef
Oh,
with
I don't know. I've
the
seen
general
computers
public.
run slow enough that I don't deny that.
Just close Google Chrome. It'll dump your 20 gigs of RAM back into available, and you can start over again, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of prompted this line of thinking? What prompted you to write this
Yeah. So
article?
what prompted me to write this because I work at Microsoft and I, for I don't know some reason I don't even know why I decided to join this 1 hour webinar by Scott Hanselman, and he was showing off GitHub Copilot. I had not seen GitHub Copilot before. And watching Scott Hanselman play with GitHub Copilot, by the 15-minute mark, I am like, I've got to go get GitHub Copilot right now. And I had started doing whatever else. And I can't tell you what happened after 15 minutes in that show because I was literally knee deep in that terminal, head first, diving into the deep end of AI and going, oh, it can do this, it can do this, it can do this, it can do this. And then once I had come up for air long enough, that's when I had some key realizations that I really needed to get down to writing just as much for myself as for others. And that's
Mhm.
kind of what prompted that article to be written.
That's it. So you mentioned this parallel between email and chat. What's that got to do with artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so this goes back to the first article that I wrote, and it was while I was working at Element. And when I got to Element, Element was a breath of fresh air because the whole company ran on chat. And I'd just gotten out of Red Hat, which runs entirely on email. And now I'm at Microsoft, which runs mostly on email. So I understand email companies and chat companies now. And so, but like at Element, getting 6 days or 6 emails a day, that was not an uncommon amount. 20 emails a day was like, oh my gosh, what happened? It's a heavy email day because we just didn't really use email except to talk to the outside world.
Hmm.
And you only needed that so frequently. And then a lot of our customers that were in our POCs, et cetera, they already had their own rooms with us because it did federate. So not everybody that we were working with on the outside even needed to use email with us, but we had it for those things. And realistically, I'd argue that chat is much better at capturing and preserving conversations and is much more readable a few weeks later than email. If you've ever gotten that email thread with like 30 to 70 threads that have all been sorted through, and now you're looking at it going like, what happened here? And yeah, this is when you turn to AI and go, Copilot, summarize that thing for me because I am
Yep.
not unpacking that anymore. But if it's all in a chat, you can scroll back up to the top where it started and you can read it in the same order that everybody else had. So there is a lot of benefit to chat as a communications mechanism. So it really did have its high points, but also email still has strengths that can't be met by chat. And realistically, from where I sit, some hybrid of the two would really be the real winner here.
Hmm.
But nobody seems to be interested in building that. So there you go, business idea: combine email and chat into one usable interface and have it work across all the protocols. And you probably have a business opportunity there. But yeah, I couldn't convince Element to do that. So there you have it. But that was kind of cool. But what does it have to do with AI? Well, it's similar in that the moment you actually use AI to do something useful and it works, you start to unlock just how limited you are by friction. So this year I'll be presenting at the Red Hat Summit on using agentic AI for Linux operations. And that sounds a lot like marketing speak. But the
A little
real
bit.
reality of that statement is that you can use GitHub Copilot to provision, configure, maintain, and troubleshoot large Linux estates.
Mm.
And anyone who's ever done those things knows that it's a tremendous amount of work. And yet, when you throw AI at it, a lot of the more tedious part of that job goes away. I mean, it gets even easier than using automation and playbooks. And in fact, it can build Ansible playbooks for you so that you can now have a declarative thing that you manage just like every other declarative thing that you've built. It's really kind of crazy, but that friction is both a limiter and it's also the space in which the human brain learns.
Mm.
So when you take away that friction, things get easier, but our brains are left going, what happened? And I felt that very strongly.
So was there a specific moment when you had that light bulb moment, or was that sort of the webinar that you mentioned?
Yeah, no, it was, well, the light bulb moment. I mean, that was the start of the light bulb moment, right? Like that webinar, that getting into that and not knowing what happened in the rest of the webinar. And apologies for Scott for not watching the last 45 minutes. I'm sure it was excellent. And I'm sure I missed a few things that I probably could use. But
I don't know.
um,
As a public speaker myself, I feel like that if the first 15 minutes of my presentation is that engaging that you spend that kind of time to go out and learn something, maybe I've done my job.
yeah, no, yeah, maybe. But it was really pulling together all of this stuff around Linux operations that was the moment it clicked. But then realizing almost as soon as I had seen, oh my gosh, Copilot can do this, realizing that the hardest parts of the job still didn't go away.
Hmm.
So when you use something like GitHub Copilot to provision, configure, maintain, and troubleshoot real Linux estates, the mechanical work drops out really, really quick. Things that used to take hours now take minutes, although you still can't change how long it takes to provision a machine or how long it takes to roll this or that out. But the amount of work to get to the point where that actually starts, that's compressed.
Hmm.
And it becomes obvious just how much of our time we waste fighting friction. So it wasn't necessarily a surprise that the responsibility didn't go away. You know, I've been doing infrastructure and ops work long enough to know that tools don't carry consequence for you. But what clicked was seeing exactly where that work lived once the friction disappeared.
Mm.
So when you let AI handle provisioning, configuration, maintenance, and first pass troubleshooting, the real shape of the job starts to become obvious. You still have to decide what should exist, what should change, what's safe, what's risky, when do you stop? AI doesn't, and it can't make those calls. It just gets you to the point where the decision is unavoidable.
Mm.
That responsibility that you have, that's the human part, and it stays human. The quality of your judgment suddenly matters a lot more. If you bring a bad assumption into the system, AI doesn't push back. And in that rare case when it does push back, you can just keep pushing back and you can force it to take your assumption. It will go, okay, fine, the user says, we're going to do what the user says. I think it's wrong, but we're going to do what the user says. But it makes the result of a bad judgment look clean and confident. and that's kind of a scary thing. You know, you think about it, you put a bad judgment in there and out the other end, it looks great.
Yep.
Your bad judgment has more lipstick on a pig than we've ever been able to put on before. So that's a scary one. So this is when it clicked. It's like at that point you realize AI isn't a replacement. It's a higher level tool that removes the resistance, but not your judgment. Once that resistance is gone, that work shifts upward. What used to be hidden inside friction, you know, we're pretending we're doing all this work. Oh yeah, I'm busy, I'm letting it compile, I'm doing all this work. Now it's fully exposed. And you're right up front with all your responsibility. And it's like, are you really as responsible as you thought you were?
You know, it's funny. I had a manager back in the day who, when he needed a break, he had these very intricate Perl scripts that would throw all kinds of just gibberish on the screen. He'd compile this package and then he'd download that package and he'd put this output on the screen for a while, and it was just a script he'd run. And it'd buy him like 10 or 15 minutes of just like idle, like clear my brain time.
Yeah, well, I remember some of the early computer games as well had like boss mode, and you'd hit the boss mode button and up would show a spreadsheet.
Yep. I
It was
probably
fantastic.
had
You'd be
those
playing
too.
your game, but like, oh, boss is coming. Let's hit the button. Yep, working on the spreadsheet.
Right. So what you describe kind of reminds me of interviews that I've seen with Air Force pilots, and
Mm.
when drones were introduced, is it's all well and good to have a drone, and they're a lot safer, more efficient in a lot of ways, but in a crisis situation, do you really want to remove the instinct that the human brain can develop? And that's very much what it sounds like we're talking about here with IT infrastructure. We may
Mm.
not be flying multi-billion-dollar aircraft, but we are handling multi-million-dollar, in some cases, data centers filled with dozens, if not hundreds or thousands of Linux servers, um, and I mean, some of that could be very life critical. I mean, you're talking medical systems, you're talking defense applications. So I guess we are kind of saving the world.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's absolutely plenty of places where this type of stuff would fall in the literally the critical path. And my reaction and response on that one, because I think it is absolutely a critical distinction, is I would not let AI touch my production environment,
Mm-hmm.
especially if life and death matters are out there. And if I did, I'd have lots of guardrails around
Yes.
it. But what I would probably recommend somebody do is use AI to build and design and experiment and figure out just how this new thing's going to work, especially if you're talking Linux operations and Linux architectures. It's really good at this stuff. Like you could really do some cool stuff with it. Do that in dev and then build Ansible playbooks and take those into your test environment and then
Mm-hmm.
move that into prod. Read
There you
through it, understand what you've actually built, take the time to judge it and say, yes, this is going to work for what we do, but enjoy the savings of time that you would
for
get
sure.
in the dev cycle.
So I want to double click on something that you're talking about, and it's right in the title, in fact. So I want to double click on this idea of AI actually did remove some things from your regular workflow. What did get removed from your workflow?
Yeah, so I mean, AI removes all sorts of mechanical friction. So, like, I'm a product manager, so I don't just play around with Linux systems all day long. And things like blank pages, boilerplate documents, repetitive configuration steps, first pass drafts, constant context switching that slows everything down, that goes away with
Mm.
AI very quickly. On the operational side, like especially with those agentic Linux workflows, you remove far more overhead than traditional automation like building and running Ansible playbooks. Those become an output of like where you're working at. And it really is kind of mind blowing to watch an AI work through a problem in that space, collapsing all of the large amount of manual setup, routine maintenance, playbook iteration, and surface level troubleshooting that consumes a lot of our time. And out the other end comes a playbook that's probably 95 to 98% ready. And if there is a problem, you can say, hey, AI, I'm having a problem with the playbook you built. It's here, here, and here. And it will go and address that. And then you can take it and it's a human readable artifact. So, I mean, that is compressing this stuff way, way down. I think one of my favorite tricks with AI right now is to dictate my thoughts for 10 or 15 minutes and then take the transcription of that dictation, feed it into AI, and say, okay, take what I just said for 15 minutes and make it into a one pager or a two pager that I
Mm.
can share with the people that need to know about this. And then
Mm-hmm.
watching a perfectly passable document come out the other end and being like, okay, I've written the document because I'm a conversationalist. I don't like
Yep.
to write documents.
Yep.
AI takes that friction out. I can now speak and then say, hey, make the document. And so that's a pretty cool thing to be able to do, or to be able to just speak stuff together and then make it as context for the next thing you're going to ask the AI. That's kind of cool. So work that used to take hours can now be done in minutes. But
I've
it's
even
really
applied this
important. Oh,
on
go ahead.
I've even applied that concept on more of a personal level, where if I'm mentally stuck on something, a thought, or uh, Monday mornings in particular, of I've got 62 meetings, I've got 40 emails, I've got 79 Slack messages. Okay, not
Mm-hmm.
really because I'm inbox zero guy, but you've got all this stuff coming at you, and sometimes that Monday morning just moment hits, and like, oh crap. And it's nice to be able to take all that context, all that information, and I've been experimenting with Claude's plugins
Mhm.
to Gmail, Google Calendar, Jira tasks, being able to compile all that information and go, here's my schedule, here's my priorities, help me make sense of what I need to focus on.
Mhm.
Or I mentioned the emotional angle of, you know what, I've got 52 different things. My daughter is having this problem. I'm having this issue at work. I'm dealing with this. And my sleep app says that I got less than 50% sleep
Hmm.
quality last night. And just like you were saying, just dictate for 15 minutes and
Yep.
just go, okay, I gave you all of that. Now tell me where I'm hung up. Tell me where I'm spiraling a little bit. Help me not like a therapist, but just analyze this data
Mhm.
and tell me what you see. And then usually from there, it's easy to take its recommendations for work priorities or take its recommendations for, dude, you just need to sit down and breathe for 10 minutes and apply that to your day.
Yeah, no, we have at work, I work at Microsoft and we have M365 Copilot, and it's actually set up right and allowed to access all the data that it needs to access to be useful, which when I see people complaining about it at work, it's like, I wonder what your IT setup did with it, because where we're at, it's fantastic. And I can go in and ask it the same type of thing, like, help me prepare for the day. Type questions, and you don't have to usually give a lot of context because it has access to my Outlook, it has access to my Teams, it has access to anything that's gone on a SharePoint, OneDrive, etc., and it's able to just reason across all of that,
Yep.
which is a fantastic thing. And you do at times have to work with how you prompt it to get the right things out of it, because AI has no idea about time, and so you have to like give it very explicit definitions about the time, like between this day, and actually like putting actual dates on that. Otherwise, you might get data from like a few weeks back, because again, AI is not good at reasoning about time. So
I put
that
time and
that can happen.
date stamps in some of my messages.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I mean, time and date stamped everything is key, and that does help. Once you give the AI a date range, it then goes, oh, now I have the context of what time it actually wants me to pull, and it works. And half the time when AI doesn't work, or when AI generates slop, as a lot of people like to call it, it's because you haven't fed it the right context, or you
Mm-hmm.
haven't really asked it the right angle that you're needing to do to get something out of it. So that's kind of a key thing in learning how to use AI, is you can't just go up to an AI, ask it a question, and expect it to deliver 100% of what you want.
For sure. Well, and computers went through the same evolution.
Hmm.
Used to be you had to program in basically binary, all not binary, but you basically had to use computer programming languages to in order to communicate with the hardware to get it to do what you wanted. And it just things got better over time and abstracted a lot of that away. AI is still going through a similar growth process.
Yeah, I've no doubt it'll get better in terms of how little you have to provide it to actually get what you're looking for. But the systems are pretty amazing these days if you
Mm-hmm.
just give it enough context and watch what happens. I mean, my goodness, Claude Opus 4.6 can literally run Linux estates, which
It's
is
been fantastic.
that's a complex problem space.
I'm okay handing it my home lab, but if I were still Linux systems administrator full time, we'd have a very serious conversation about production.
Yeah, like I said, you would build your things in dev, and then you'd move them to test, and then over to production, and you would draw that gate most likely.
So we talked a little
Depends on
bit
what's in
about what,
production.
right, and it'll still break in production because it's prod. What do
Oh,
you expect?
yeah, yeah, prod always breaks. But that's another spot. One thing that's really cool is letting it troubleshoot stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have to have it actually like write anything at that point. So you could ask it to troubleshoot your production environment.
For sure. So we talked about what AI has kind of taken out of your workflow.
Hmm.
What remains, and why does that matter more now than it did before you started using AI?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, with AI, taking things out of your workflow, one of the trade-offs there is that the repetitive steps that we used to do weren't just busy work.
Hmm.
They were where people actually learned systems and developed intuition and built judgment. So when AI removes that layer, the effort does drop dramatically, but that work, as I've said, it goes up. But where do people learn
Hmm.
is a huge question that kind of comes out of that. But now you ask what remains. Well, what's left is judgment, taste, responsibility. So AI can generate fluent, confident output, but it cannot tell you when that's actually right or wrong. And it can make it look very right. And there's plenty of people out there taking AI generated answers and going, here you go. I got the answer. You missed
Yeah,
step A, B, and C.
but your answer looks great. It's still wrong, but
Yeah, it's
it's great.
beautiful. Oh, it's a beautiful looking. Again, it's the lipstick on a pig thing. We've never been able to put lipstick on a pig quite so delicately as we can now. It's amazing.
Well,
But
and we
humans are still responsible for deciding what should exist, what should change, what's safe, what's risky, and when to stop. So when you end up in an AI saturated world, that ability to make the call clearly and consistently stops being a nice to have and actually now becomes infrastructure.
mm,
Because without that ability to judge, without that ability to discern what's coming out of the system, you don't really have a system.
mm. We saw a huge gap open up, even more so with junior systems administrators and junior developers when containers kind of
Mm.
rushed onto the scene. Instead of having to worry about how to compile Java applications, now you just deploy the container. Instead of figuring out how to set up PHP to talk to a MySQL
Hmm.
database and run behind an Apache web server, you just spin up the container. And I can remember setting up Nextcloud by hand. You
Hmm.
had the web app, you had the database backend, you had the file system that you all that had to be
Oh,
configured,
these
all the
applications are
permissions had
not
to be
fun
right.
to set up and deploy.
No, they're not.
They're not.
But
Multi
did it by
steps,
hand
awful.
for sure. And one of the greatest things ever is the Nextcloud container and a companion database app.
Mm.
Granted, they have all in ones, but I argue that they don't perform as well.
Yeah.
But we've seen this in the enterprise space as well, that we've we may have obfuscated too much away. We've hidden too much of the complexity that, like you mentioned, a lot of that muscle memory, that intuition building isn't there anymore. And it's a muscle that I'll admit has atrophied in
Mm.
myself as I'm going to prepare for a Linux certification. I went and took a pretest and failed miserably. I won't say how miserably, but it was awful. And I was like, aren't I a Linux professor? Aren't I a Linux technical product marketer? Don't I do Linux for a living? It's like, but I don't do this every day. If I can't troubleshoot a problem in 15 minutes, I just blow away the VM and start over because they're all lab systems. So why would I try and troubleshoot a weird issue? And I've noticed that that's kind of chipped away at at how sharp my skills are.
Well, I'll say that when I was in college, I was in Unix class, and I was a Linux guy. I mean, I was getting deep into the world of Linux, and I was doing Linux day in and day out. I lived in Linux. I ran Linux on the desktop. I was building Linux systems, doing Gentoo, the whole nine yards. I was Linux, Linux, Linux. I made a C in that class. You know
Ouch.
why I made a C in that class? I made a C in that class because that class was predicated on memorizing every single
Yes.
option to every obscure Unix thing ever, and it was presented as multiple choice tests where you would have
Yep.
A, B, C, and D, and they would be like some of the most esoteric permutations of those exact options, and you had to basically have the man pages memorized in your head. Now, I don't think. I mean, if you knew that stuff, okay, great, you can make an A, but does that mean you know Unix? Does that mean you understand the principles or how to do it? No, I don't think it does.
Mhm.
And I would actually argue that using AI to do this Linux stuff is kind of like the next level up in a
Right.
sense that like you still need to understand the architecture and how the componentry is put together, but you don't necessarily have to understand the esoteric, well, what is the dash E flag to this particular command going to do? I don't care. But I
Right.
know that I need to use that command to attach this piece to that piece. And I know that really realistically, all I want to do is attach these pieces.
Mhm.
So if I know that and I know what my intent is, then I can very quickly get to an end state that's going to be what I want it to be without having to necessarily know that. But so it kind of, the work does move up. Just like today, you don't need to know assembly code.
Mhm.
Most of us, at least. And is your life any worse because you don't know assembly code? Probably not.
So I mentioned that as a lead into a topic that even I myself as a marketer just kind of roll my eyes. I get what they're building towards, but the term just bugs me, and that's vibe coding. Um, I hate that that's become a term, but like most terms in IT, it's just whatever dumb name we attribute to something, that's what it's named in perpetuity. So vibe coding is a thing, and I see people and companies that spend a lot of time doing that now. Granted, I've engaged in a brand of vibe coding, and that a lot of the home lab work that I'm doing is with Claude and a
Mm-hmm.
terminal and building Ansible scripts. And I've noticed that the smaller the playbook that you're trying to work with Claude to do, the better, the,
Mm-hmm.
the higher quality it is. Instead of just give me a series of playbooks that do all these things, just say I need a playbook that does X. I need a playbook that does Y. It makes life a whole lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
But what is vibe coding to you, and what does that mean for students and for people that maybe haven't had a quote developer background?
Yeah, so vibe coding is simply when you stop specifying every step. Like, when you code, you have to specify every single step. Okay.
Mhm.
Gosh, we could start at the beginning of coding. You've got to declare variables and you've got to now figure out what you're going to do and have a plan. Boy, that sounds like what AI does, but you've got to have your plan for how you're going to get to where you want to go based on what you think you need to do. And then you are manually iterating through all those different parts until finally you actually end up with a piece of code that somewhat works. Then you keep iterating and iterating and iterating until you hit that moment that it works. But in vibe coding, you take all of that specifying away and you're instead guiding the system by intent, constraints, and critique. You're describing what you want to exist, what matters, what's unacceptable, rather than writing out every instruction line by line. And your whole point about if I start small, it does really well. If I tell it to do a bunch of things all at once, it's not as good. So yes, do it in smaller parts, break a large problem down into small steps and then do each of the small steps individually and then map to the greater piece. And, now you end up with a really good piece of code. But that's good engineering, right? Like
Mhm.
if I tell my engineering team I need the entire thing done in 2 weeks, it's not going to be as good as if I give them the time to actually work on each individual part. So vibe coding isn't not knowing how to code, or let's stop understanding how systems work, right? It actually demands the opposite. On some level, vibe coding is harder than coding, which probably sounds counterintuitive. But the fact is that once you let AI generate something and operate at speed, especially in real infrastructure or production systems, ignorance actually becomes dangerous.
Oh, for sure.
Security alone is impossible to reason about if you don't understand your own architecture, your boundaries, your failure modes. So while AI has removed that friction and you've got an app now and I can be SaaS developer of the month and find a bunch of people that are going to pay me a lot of money, well, your responsibility has become incredibly concentrated.
Right.
It's now you and that AI.
Yep.
And if you don't understand what you built, you are now wholly reliant on the AI to figure out any problems that you run into, or if you get hacked.
Yep.
Where was the security vulnerability that the people exploited? What was the impact of the hack? All these types of things you've now got to handle, and it's on you. So that responsibility just got concentrated back on you very quickly. So if you bring good judgment into the vibe coding process, AI amplifies it. Okay, I came in and I approached it from a good engineering mindset. I'm probably going to have a reasonably good product on the other end of this thing. Maybe even something I can mostly understand. But if I bring a bad assumption, again, it makes it look very clean and confident, and it looks great. And you're like, wow, I did it. What did
It,
you do?
it'll look beautiful as it crashes into that mountain.
Yes, it will. I mean, it exposes that once the execution is cheap, knowing what you're doing and knowing when to stop is actually the real work that we need to be doing.
Definitely, and to me, it's kind of like the way I've explained it to people is vibe coding or just building something with AI is almost like having to take over someone else's work.
Yes,
When
it's
I
very
would
much that
start at a
story.
new company as a Linux systems administrator, I always hated those first few months
Yep.
because I eventually just wrote a script that I would carry with me from job to job because you never knew if it was going to be like a 12-month contract or if it was a contract to hire or if it was full time. You never knew what you're going to end up with. So I just built this script and I wish I still had it, but I just
Hmm.
carry it to job and it would pull just tons of information of beyond what the basic RPM packages on this version of Enterprise Linux, what packages are installed, how
Hmm.
much RAM, what's the model number, what's the host name, and every time I would discover a new system, I'd just go run the script and I'd add it to a spreadsheet, and I always hated taking over other people's work. I always loved building my own systems from scratch when I'd move from job to job because I knew exactly what was there. I knew exactly how it was configured. I knew exactly what I needed to watch in terms of performance or
Hmm.
security vulnerabilities. I knew those systems in and out because I built them. But if you're vibe coding all that, you're and it'd be worse if I was a developer. You'd have to understand exactly every little subroutine, every array that is built, everything that AI puts into that code. You've got to have that higher level discernment so that you can look at it and go, oh, I see what it did there. And you need to take the time to ask it, well, why did you do this? Or why is this for loop there? Because if you don't, then inevitably when production breaks on at 8 p.m. on a Friday night, right after your medium rare steak has been delivered,
Yeah.
that is when things break. Ask me how I know.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you have to get down into that little detail because, if you take over somebody else's code, you're probably not going to get down to that level of detail right at the beginning, at least. But you can ask AI to reason about systems that you've just now gotten to see for the first time and to kind of give you a high level architecture, especially with code. It's actually really good at doing that. So, where you are in a vibe coded situation, I mean, it doesn't get you out of having to know how to build software. It just doesn't. Like,
Mhm.
you need that skill. You need that understanding. You need to be able to go, okay, I've now got a Flask app. It's written in Python. It's got this structure to it. This is the flow. We start at this part of the application. Here's where we've got these routes and connectors put in place. This is the general layout of the code base. You need that level of understanding. And AI can definitely give you that pretty quick. Plus, just looking at a directory can give you a lot of that really quick too. So it's not that it's impossible to get up to that point, but it
Oh, for
is
sure.
that you don't want to vibe code for. I saw this on Reddit. We didn't watch our code for 6 months and now we're in a bad spot. It's like, yeah, if you let your code base iterate for 6 months with vibe coding and you didn't go like pay attention, you got some catching up to do.
I've seen a lot
So
of open
it's
source
you got to
developers.
watch it. You're
Yeah.
not going to just be able to hand the system. Again, that's giving up the judgment. It's giving up the responsibility, which is a key part of my argument that like AI can help you move fast, but AI cannot be a judge. I mean, again, this is statistical algorithms
Hmm.
running massive matrix multiplication arithmetic at the end of the day. It doesn't judge. It doesn't think. It's math.
And best
You
guess at
can't
that.
give up your judgment. Well, it's exactly. It's probability, right? It's statistics. It's the probability that this word is next in the list. It's a large language model. Language model,
Yep.
which code is language, which is why it's so good at code, right? Because
Yep.
code is language. And realistically, after something like four, well, we know exactly what's going to come after four, right? And we know what's going to come in a while loop. And we know these types of things. And you have so much code that has been trained on that the probability of the very next thing being exactly what you need is so close now that, yeah, you can have it write it and it actually works and it runs and it's amazing and it's kind of wild to watch. But it doesn't take away your need to judge what you've asked it and your need to judge what it actually generated for you, as opposed to just, let's just let it go. That's a mistake.
A little bit. So, how do engineers need to think differently about their jobs now?
Well, I think you need to learn how to use a paintbrush or. Just kidding. Just kidding. I do think that engineers need to think about their roles differently now, not because the fundamentals have changed, but because where the responsibility sits has. So, again, as an engineer, you still got to understand that system very deeply. But AI is going to remove a lot of the mechanical work that used to slow us down. That means that the role up levels. So instead of just being the engineer who's like, okay, write the following functions, they take the following parameters and they need to return the following values, because that's junior dev work, right? That's junior dev work. Instead of being at that level, it's going to be like, okay, architect the system that's going to do the following 20 things. Okay, well, that takes some responsibility, because I've actually got to think about how I want to see that architected, and I can use AI to help kind of co-think through how that would best be architected. I mean, again, it is trained on a lot of very interesting code bases and probably has a lot of patterns that could help me in that type of line of thought. But judgment is absolutely key. I mean, that just becomes the big part of the job. You've got to be able to decide what should exist, what's safe, what shouldn't be built. When do you stop? So when the execution gets easy, the quality of thinking becomes the actual work.
So this is a conversation that I hear. Some folks may remember that I'm actually an adjunct professor at a community college here in town, and it's been interesting to watch the conversation grow. And as I understand it, you're also a regent, and I'm
Correct.
kind of curious what your first, what is a regent? Second of all, what how is this how has this affected higher ed?
Yeah, so Regent at a university, there's a handful of different models you can use, but universities that use a Board of Regents model, your Board of Regents basically acts almost as a board of directors. They sit kind of adjacent to a president's office, and sometimes there's a council that goes along with that president as well, and a handful of staff members. But effectively, the regents become the sounding board and the decision makers for things that do need kind of a bifurcation of duty between those actually running the school and those appointed to a separate board. It's really a checks and balance system to make sure that a university is well run. And so the work of regent is to participate in that board and to basically be fully aware and understanding how the university is being run, and to be presented with the challenges and opportunities that the university is facing, and to actually make decisions based off of what you are being presented with as a board.
Yes, sir. And so, what decisions are you seeing schools making about AI, whether right or wrong?
Yeah, so schools are out there having to make lots of decisions about AI. And interestingly enough, one of the first things that schools kind of gravitate to once they see AI is all around detection, misuse, productivity. And that's kind of where they start, right? Oh, we've got to make sure that kids aren't cheating with AI. We've got to make sure that people aren't misusing the technology, or, there's a lot of fear about that technology, because if you are to go out there and go on to like ChatGPT or go to Copilot, or insert your favorite freely available AI on the internet, and you type, write an essay about this particular battle in World War II and what it meant for the Allied front, you will get an essay.
Yep.
It's not going to be a good one.
Nope.
But you will get an essay. And I just want to go back in life a couple of decades, because I remember as a kid thinking that the coolest thing in the world would be if there was a machine that did our homework. And I can remember thinking about how that felt like the most out there, wild, abstract idea that could never actually be realized. Because Well, homework takes a lot of complexity to actually be able to crunch through and do. And, computers, while they were cool, they could present you with a word processor, they could present you with a spreadsheet, but they couldn't do anything after that. You had to be the one to drive everything, or they could present you with a programming language, but you had to write the code. And by the time you've written code to do your homework, you've done your homework. So it's like,
Right.
you know, when this is your operational understanding of machinery and computing, you don't see a possibility in which a machine can actually do your homework. It's just too far fetched.
Mhm.
Now we have a machine that can do your homework. That's a wild moment. That is a wild, wild moment. And I think that what we need to be doing, instead of focusing on how it can be misused and all these different things, because that can be done. And I think that there are solutions to those challenges, but I think we also would do ourselves a big disservice if we do not focus on how learning itself has changed now that friction is gone. And one of the ways you can do this is make kids write papers in class.
Not a bad
Bound
idea.
the writing paper time to class. Sit there and actually read and work with them a lot more. That requires a lot more like one-on-one instruction. If you're in a lecture hall of 100, 200 students, you're not going to be able to do that. But in a smaller class environment, you could do that. You can spend time actually doing those things. So there are actual, just really logistical things you can do to shift the shape of the work. And honestly, I think that teaching kids that, look, if you use AI to write your essay, we're going to give you the grade you deserve and you're not going to learn anything.
Yep.
Because I think that that's a key thing too, is like just continuing to educate that you can do this, but you're shortchanging the entire purpose of the exercise. The purpose of the exercise isn't to generate one more billion essay on this particular thing in World War II. Like that is just not, nobody cares. But we want to see that you can go read, understand this material, and turn it around into your own thoughts and then spit it back out as your own thing. That's
Definitely.
what we're judging you on in that exercise. And so, yeah, you got to get to that point. And yes, kids that cheat with AI are cheating the system. They're cheating themselves. And I think that getting them to understand that is super important, because if students aren't getting judgment through struggle and repetition anymore, which is what those types of exercises really do promote, then schools have to be very intentional about where that formation is going to come from. Because without that shift, you're going to end up graduating students who know how to move very fast, but aren't yet equipped to evaluate consequences, manage risk, or know when to stop. And that's scary.
You made a couple of really good points that I wanted to wanted to echo, and the first was in my last fall was my first time teaching ever, and I thought with my lengthy technical marketing background that I was well set to be a professor.
Mm-hmm.
I was very, very wrong. I mean, yes, a lot of the technical skills do transfer, whether that's Linux or
Yep.
building a compelling slide deck, but teaching and delivering a talk at a conference, two very, very different things. Please don't tell my dean I said that, but because I got the job because of my marketing background. But
Yeah.
but hey, about 10 weeks in or so, my first semester teaching, we kind of found a rhythm, and I kind of brought that kind of conversational speaking style that I love so much to teaching as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember just a few weeks in, sitting on the edge of my desk and having to look at a dozen 18, 19, 20 somethings and go, look, I'm not dumb. I use AI every day for my job. If you're going to fill out a lab sheet using AI, you're wasting my time, you're wasting your time, and most of all, you are not doing what you are here to do, and that's to learn. You need to build these processes. Could you build automation that does all of the Linux administration? That's the class I teach, is Linux systems administration. Yes, you could build
Yeah, you
automation to do
absolutely
all
could.
of
And in the
this.
real world, that's what we want to do.
Exactly. And could I then take that a step further and have AI write the automation to do all the things for me? Yes. But what happens when you're in an environment where you don't have access to that tool? What happens when that tool is offline? What happens when something breaks and you're not getting anywhere with AI? I'm looking at you, AI and Blender, with this weird issue with my banners right now that I cannot seem to solve. And just having to explain to these kids this, like, look, if I catch you using artificial intelligence to fill out your homework, I'm going to give, like you said, I'm going to give you the grade you deserve. But most of
Mhm.
all, you're cheating yourself. It's not that you're cheating the system. I mean, as a professor, I have to tell you, don't cheat the system. But as a person, as someone who's spent 20 plus years in this industry, don't cheat yourself. Use this time to learn and grow and experiment and break things, because I don't get to break things nearly as much as I used to. And in my professional career, when you break things, that usually has has a financial aspect to it, whether it's your company's profits or your own salary.
That is what's fun about being in a learning environment is you can break things without the financial consequences typically. You know,
For
you
sure.
can get in there and you can say, okay, let me screw up this computer. And when it's so badly screwed up that I can't even fix it anymore, we'll reinstall, start over, and I'll have learned something new in the process. But yeah, when you're out in the real world and you're working with production systems and you go and you break something, it's a lot different feeling. When you're sitting there looking at that broken system, I'll never forget sitting in an office in Lower Manhattan. I'll redact the customer name, but I was sitting there working with their key satellite administrator, and we were doing, good Lord, a Satellite 5 upgrade,
Oh my
Red Hat
goodness.
Satellite 5 upgrade, and we were dealing with Oracle database. And if you didn't give the Oracle database enough space in one particular table before you did the upgrade, and there was no way to know how much space you needed, it was just kind of a guess, it would break the upgrade. And if you break an Oracle database upgrade in the middle of it, you're done. You're
Yep.
hosed. You have to restore the database. Ooh. When you're sitting there with a
Feel like I
major
might have worked
financial
for that company.
services client and you've just told them, let's start the upgrade, and now it broke, you are now hoping that the backup strategy actually worked. That is a lot different than being in the classroom. Thankfully, the story has a happy ending. The backup strategy did work. We were able to restore the latest backup. We were then able to expand the table to the size that it needed to, because it's only when it breaks that it tells you how much you've got to extend it by.
Oh, lovely.
Anyway, kind of a bad design, but that's not a slant at Red Hat. That's how Oracle database upgrades work.
Oh yeah.
But it's yeah. So we got it done and we got it all working, and life was good. But boy, you talk about sweating bullets, especially compared to what you get in the classroom environment. I'd much rather have those learning moments in the classroom environment. And honestly, the best AI could do at that point is tell you, "Ooh, that looks bad. Do you have a backup?" So I mean, there's a lot of places where AI, as good as it is, again, it really is just about getting the execution out of there. It's not about the judgment. And once you've already made the judgment and it's landed you in a spot where things are broken, well, you got to figure your way out. And I mean,
Yep.
AI can be helpful in that scenario and it can recommend some things to you. But again, the only forward answer at that point was, is the database backup good and can you restore from it? Because that's your next step. And if the database backup is gone, you are hosed. Period.
I'm sure there's a study somewhere, but I'm sure that there is a list of companies that exist somewhere that no longer exist today because of that very situation.
Mm. Hmm.
And when
Yeah.
the upgrade fails, that is not the time to be asking, do we have a good backup strategy?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, the other problem is like learning that your backup is a good strategy, but it was on tape and the tape is corrupted or corroded. And now all of a sudden, 20 hours into reading tapes, you can't read the last part of that tape archive. And oh my gosh, I mean, like enterprise backups are scary. They really are. You don't want to be in the room when you have to go restore that stuff because it's like
Nope.
that is a very intense situation. And AI is not going to help you with that.
Nope.
It's going to tell
That's
you, I'll throw some good thoughts your way, but
that's when you have the tape read going on one monitor, and on the other
yep.
monitor, your resume is open and you're updating it, just in case. What's one thing that AI still can't do that people assume that it can?
Mm. It cannot decide when something should not exist. So
It's a
it
good one.
can generate, optimize, and refine endlessly, but it does not feel the weight of consequence. It's not in that backup room with you going, oh no, this is really bad. It's like, yeah, it sounds bad, but I'm not you. It cannot recognize. It can't recognize when a technically correct, fluent, or impressive output is still wrong for ethical, human, or contextual reasons. Which that's pretty important because those things are huge, and AI can't tell that this is wrong because it's unethical or it's inhumane or it's completely wrong for the context that you're
Hmm.
operating in. So the decision to stop, to withhold, or to say, no, don't do that, this shouldn't be built, that's irreducibly human.
That's a good
And it
answer.
will remain that way. AI is not going to get there.
Yeah, and I've had this conversation with people in the marketing space. I know we're getting off topic from our rapid fire, but this is what happens when Carl and I sit down and talk about technology. You should see our LinkedIn messages. But I've had this conversation with marketing. It's like,
Mhm.
just because we can have AI supplement our blog writing team and produce 15 blogs a week, should we? Is that really going to help? I mean,
Well,
how
I
many
would
different?
actually argue that if you use AI as a thinking partner, so somebody sits down and they think through with the AI and they have like almost Socratic dialogue with it
Mhm,
about like, let's improve that. No, that doesn't sound right. No, no,
mhm,
no. And you're basically like fighting with the LLM back and forth and doing that for like an hour or two or three. If you have like
mhm.
that type of conversation with your AI and out the other end pops a blog that you're like, actually, that's better than I could have done it myself. All right, do 15 of those a week. But if you're just like, hey, generate me 15 blogs this week that are going to touch these topics, I'm done, right? No. You've
You
still
know,
got to put the thought and the judgment in.
I do that a lot with content now.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done this. I've done this as a blue green uh, development as well. And one thing I found to produce decent content, sticking with the blog example, I've gone through that where I've kind of talked out as
Mm-hmm.
part of the prompt, talked out. I want to say this, and I want to prove this point, and I've got this messaging guide that kind of outlines the pros and cons of our product. But I really don't think this is true for our customers. And I know I've got this customer's case study where they specifically call out that this feature's good. Can you throw a shell of a blog together for me? And sometimes the outline's amazing, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, here's some examples of my work. Rewrite it that in my voice, and it comes out, and it's like, okay, that's good. Let's step through it paragraph by paragraph. Okay, we can't say this. This isn't the right.
Mm-hmm.
This case study isn't cited here. This sentence makes no sense, or I would never say that. I've written blogs that way, and I've written the same blog the way that I've always written blogs, and that's go
Mm-hmm.
in, sit down with a blank, Google
Yep.
Doc or whatever, and just write it out. And usually the former is better.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, it takes me about the same amount of time because if it's not enough to just say this is my topic, here's my outline, go write me a blog. That's
Yep.
that's
Yep.
not going to produce you
Well, you can
anything that's
start
good.
at a prompt, and I mean that's fine, but you do have to engage in conversation with the thing and
Yep.
push back all the
Yep.
time. My favorite thing, one of my favorite responses from the LLM is, "You are right to push back." You know, like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. Or like if it
You're
comes up
right
with
to call
something
that
that you're
out. My
just
bad.
like, this is unbelievable. You're like, well, where did you get that? And I actually have in my profile.md that I pass into every single one. That's another thing. We could get into like how to use AI, but like I actually have a profile.md, which is basically 80, 100 lines that the LLM is going to get every single time I start a conversation with AI. That's how to work with me. And one of
Mhm.
those things is don't make stuff up for the sake of making things up. Like if you're going to actually do that, you need to state, I inferred the following from these sources, or I brought these things together to infer this. And it actually does work. It kind of helps move it away from that natural mode. Because if you don't change how it works, like in your initial prompting, which this is getting into advanced AI and why when you go tell it, write my essay, and you just hit enter and expect good output, you don't get it.
Mhm.
If you don't change it, then its default is to be extremely confident about everything, infer where it can't figure out, and present you this, perfect lipstick on a pig, wonderful rosy view of the world that may or may not be right.
Yeah, very, very true.
And then what are
And
you going to do
it's
with that?
most people it seems like just go out and hit publish. Say
Well,
I did it.
exactly,
I
right.
did
And
my thing.
I don't, there's like this whole debate on the internet right now. Should I use AI Or like, oh, that somebody wrote that with AI. I don't want to read it. People that write with AI, I don't like to read that. I want to have a handcrafted human thing. You know, the human has to write it for it to be valuable. I would say I don't care if they used AI or not. I want to care, is it good output? Like,
Mhm.
okay, you hit publish on that AI output. Well, you have now put your name on that. I don't care if you wrote it with AI. It's now yours. Those are your words. You decided that those words in that format were what you wanted to say. If it's
Yep.
bad, I'm going to say you wrote a bad piece. I don't care that you used AI to do it. You put bad work out there.
It's like the worst ghostwriter ever.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing, right? I mean, how many marketing departments have rewritten stuff I've written as a PM to the point where what's out there on the internet with my name on it, is it my writing or not? You know, depending on how heavily the marketing departments edited that.
Guilty. I might have rewritten some of your work back in the day, but
You
that was
probably
before
have.
AI.
And I've had like I've worked with I've had every single marketing person I've had the pleasure of working with has been excellent to work with. And sometimes they've gotten the assignment perfect and it's been an improvement, and I've been more than happy to publish those things. But once in a while, they've totally missed the point of the assignment and it's
Mhm.
completely wrecked the point of the article. I remember there was one time where this happened, and I ended up talking to like somebody really high up in the marketing organization, and they're like, this is a mess. We just need a blog that does X. And I said, like this? And I handed them my first draft. And they said, that's like 90% there. Like,
There
I
you go.
know that's what I wrote initially, but now the iterated only 30% there version is what came out of your department. And he actually
Right.
finished the last 10%, and we got a very good piece out there. But it is, I mean, like when we write, it's not uncommon to have editors.
Mhm.
And if you think of the AI as a thinking partner and you think of it more in an editorial sense, or you're going to have a conversation with it and you're going to get into the Socratic dialogue about, is this right or is this wrong, or you said this and I really think this, and then you're not using AI the way people that go to it and say, write me an essay, are
Right.
using it.
Right. So this turned out to be extended discussion instead of rapid fire questions, but I had one more that I wanted to ask you off my list. What is a book or idea, some kind of resource that has shaped how you're thinking about this particular topic, particularly as
Oh,
an
yeah.
avid reader myself?
Yeah, there's a handful of books that have shaped how I think about the world in general, and especially AI. Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis warns about technical power turning into technocracy, which
Mhm.
is a very real threat, frankly, with this
Mhm.
stuff in the wrong hands. So that's that's an important warning to heed. There's a book out there called A Canticle for Leibovitz, which, if you haven't read that one, I wouldn't be surprised. It's a little more esoteric, but it's a phenomenal book. And it is about rediscovering power without wisdom. Just a real quick synopsis on Canticle. Effectively, the first part of the world is describing a world in which science has been forgotten.
Mm.
Like, there was a previous world in which everybody got so upset about technology that they got rid of it. And they buried all the science and the technology. And so the current world, there's like rumblings that there used to be this science stuff, but nobody can understand it. They finally bring in somebody who like gets it. Then there's like this period of time in the middle of the book where like nothing really happens. The world just kind of goes quiet. Then somebody makes the evolutionary discovery of how to bring the science and the technology back, and they start realizing that they can use it again, and they
Mm.
actually end up using technology to destroy the world. It's a pretty good book, but it is about rediscovering power without wisdom, because when you had that many generations go without it, you lost the wisdom that had come with it. And so now all of a sudden
Mm.
you've got these people that don't have the true understanding of what the power of this stuff actually is, starting to wield it, and they end up
Mm.
destroying the world with it. So that's where the true genius of that book is. And so that's pretty poignant to the moment. And then one last one I'd like to mention is Matthew Crawford's Shop Class of Soulcraft. Slightly, a little bit less, traumatic of a reading, I guess. It's a much more enjoyable read. Canonical is a really good book. I highly recommend it, but boy, it's heavy at times. But Shop Class is Soulcraft, a little bit lighter, but it explains how judgment is really formed through friction and responsibility. You know, why
Mm.
going back and working with your hands and doing the types of things that you would have done in a shop class back when you and I were probably going to high school, and I don't know if they even have shop class anymore, but why that's the type of thing that can help you really get established as a person and really kind of understand the things that you're working with. So I think that all of those kind of come together because they all talk about these different things that really kind of hit the AI topic.
Mm. That's awesome. And, you know, you talk about shop class and that kind of thing. I've gone back to paper notes. I have 3 books that I've purchased in the last month from Half Price Books.
Mm-hmm.
I literally have a USB-C battery-powered lamp light, a little book lamp that I use at night.
Yeah.
My iPad has been dead for weeks because it's just sitting on my nightstand, and it's sitting under my pile of books that I'm reading. And so it's been funny. You get weird looks when you go out and you know, sit up at the bar and have a drink, and you have your notebook and your book sitting there. People just like, does that guy not know about these things that we sit in our pockets? It's like, I do. There's a reason why I'm taking time away from them. But yeah, it's been an interesting adjustment, trying to figure out how to live a high tech life without all the the heartache that comes with it. I really appreciate you joining me, Karl. It was great to have you back on the show, and I think you and I have like 2 or 3 other show topics. We should just take an afternoon and record them all.
Yeah, we should.
But definitely we'll have you back on the show real soon.
All right. Yeah, it was good being here. Thanks for having me, Eric.
Yeah, it's always an engaging conversation. You always give me something to think about, so I really appreciate that. And if you're new to the IT Guy Show, definitely appreciate you tuning in and hanging out with me for an hour every other week or so as I bring in guests and friends of the show to just ponder different thoughts and share different feedback, different perspectives, that kind of thing. Because let's face it, sitting here listening to me talk for an hour is no fun. So definitely appreciate you tuning in. If you're watching this online, make sure to hit the like button. It'll take you 3 seconds and greatly helps the show get wider reach. I have brilliant people like Karl join me every other week, and it's great to get their thoughts and get them out there. But it doesn't do me a lot of good if no one else watches it. So definitely hit subscribe, as I've got more podcast episodes lined up, and make sure to hit like. That way more people find it. And if you had any thoughts, anything you wanted to add to the conversation, make sure you use the comments. I check those every day and respond to every single comment. I'll be back in 2 weeks. I think I may have finally nailed down a time to record an episode about my home lab with a particular well-known home labber. So until that date is narrowed down, I'll just keep teasing that episode until I finally pin him down to a date and time. But really excited to kind of rebuild my home lab. One thing that the last 7 years in sales and marketing has taught me is I don't spend nearly enough time in the terminal. And that's kind of been an interesting problem to have, especially with as much dependence as we have on technology, on AI and automation. So it makes it even more interesting. But definitely stay tuned. Got more content coming your way this year. And definitely follow me on socials and subscribe to the podcast so you get more content like this. And tell a friend. Would really appreciate it. So on behalf of my guest today, Karl Abbott from Microsoft, and myself, Eric the IT Guy Hendricks, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you again next time.